with what comes with owning some land is trees, and what comes with trees is leaves. So
That is true. You raking or what?
raking them up and then using my mower has an attachment that like collects them. So just like breaking them out like a thin sheet and just running them over.
Oh my gosh. That's so nice.
And then dumping it.
That's so nice.
It's nice, but man.
It's a lot.
Yeah, especially when like my granddad used to live here. Like along and so like they never had a fence in the back. And there was never any leaves, and the way the wind blows, it like blows it to the back. And we have dogs, so we got a fence, of course, and then they just started piling up. And I was like, oh, man. So it was like a year more worth, maybe 2 years worth of leaves, just like all back there. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a lot to maintain.
If it wasn't for the leaves, I wouldn't care.
Yeah. That becomes a lot though. You getting sunburnt yet or no?
I probably will be tomorrow. I don't know if I may look like a raccoon because I had sunglasses on. So
I did today too. My arms are all pink.
Yeah, it's redheads, man.
We get ruined. No, Mystic, that was not Cat. That was me. Oh, there is a cat behind me. Yeah. What's going on, girl? Yeah, you're good. You're good, babe.
Leave the leaves?
Leave the leaves.
The leaves get wet, and then under that stays wet, and then the fence rots and falls down. I want to pay for another one.
Yeah, it can actually cause problems depending on the property.
Ants.
Yes, yeah.
Spiders, snakes. Oh, crap.
Oh, man. It's funny how the sun just takes everything right out of you.
Oh, I know. And, like, that's why I love swimming, because, like, you get the sun, and for some reason swimming makes me super hungry, and those are the best naps after that.
Yeah, that's true. It's for the BWW? What is happening? Cat, what are you talking about? All right. I'm going to get this all pulled up. I am exhausted. Oh, for the bees and the critters. Yeah, but what is the BBW or BWW? The bees. Yeah, I don't even know. I can't make sense of that.
If you have a empty can of spray paint downstairs later, it might explain what Cat's talking about here.
Empty can of spray paint.
Saying she's crazy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Pardon me.
Oh, it was a typo. Got it.
Buffalo Wild Wings?
That's probably oh, there you go, yeah. Classic. All right. I'm gonna get going. I'm super tired, so we're gonna try to burn through stuff today. Paul and Silas in Thessalonica, chapter 17, or Thessalonica, depending on who you talk to. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of Jews. Now, Thessalonica was a major city in the Roman province of Macedonia. It was roughly 95 miles west of Philippi, which is the same place, like we talked about on Thursday, that Paul wrote the epistle to the Philippians, along with Egnatian Way. It served as a port with close ties with Rome. Going back, verse 1, where there was a synagogue of Jews too, and Paul went in, as was his custom. And on 3 Sabbath days, he reasoned with them from the scriptures. 3, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead. The reference to the resurrection, Paul's preaching centers around this. And it's interesting that it kind of travels culturally, regardless of who he's talking to or what epistle you refer to. Paul's always got this heavy focus on the death and on the resurrection of Jesus. And we talked about it with 1 Corinthians a bit, that the primary reason for that was just that the cultures of the time, specifically Greco-Roman, but outside of that, they had a really hard time with this due to the paganism that was heavy in the culture, and they did not believe in that type of after-death life in any way. He could have supported that viewpoint, also coming from Isaiah 53, 10 through 12, as he did in 1 Corinthians. Continuing, and saying, this Jesus, whom I proclaim to you, is the Christ. 4. And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks. The devout Greeks is sometimes that verse, or that section of the verse, sometimes translated as God-fearing Greeks. So these are Gentiles who worshiped the true God, is what we would say, our God. And not a few of the leading women, verse 5, but the Jews were jealous, also translated differently with filled with jealousy. Same point comes across. As we saw earlier in Pisidian Antioch in chapter 13, Iconium in chapter 14, and Lystra also in chapter 14, the jealousy of these Jews within that area is really pushing to oppose Paul and the entire movement of the early church. So you have these kind of traditional Jews. Baby girl, you good? You got the traditional Jews who are really having a hard time accepting the new early church movement here. And taking some wicked men of the rabble, they formed a mob, set the city in an uproar, we would call that a riot today, and attacked the house of Jason, seeking to bring them out to the crowd. Verse 6, and when they could not find them, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers before the city authorities, shouting, these men who have turned the world upside down have come here also. 7, and Jason has received them, and they are all acting against the decrees of Caesar. Also translated, contrary to the wishes of Caesar. So the to push, press, and kind of get their point across, to portray their case. The opposition is accusing the early church and this early church movement of promoting sedition against Caesar, which was a crime during that time. Social, political, religious, all of these beliefs were very tightly ingrained together within these cultures. And even in early America, that was a fact. And then religion and political and social culture became kind of disengaged as modernity really set in. But even early America, and very much so, if you go back beyond that to biblical days, the social, political, and religious beliefs were all basically one thing. They were all completely together. And when they're that tight, when they're that closely correlated, and anything becomes weak or anything shifts or change, it changes the entire contextual meaning of these social, political, and religious structures. So going against Caesar was a big deal, and being accused of going against Caesar was a really big deal. Picking up back in 7, the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another King Jesus. So the church's push or promotion of Christ as the true king makes anybody who opposes this idea a threat to Caesar. Again, same thing. And you can also find references to this out of Luke, who again is the author of what we're reading right now. But Luke chapter 23, 2 through 3. You've got a similar reference there. Verse 8, and the people and the city authorities were disturbed when they heard these things. 9, and when they had taken money as security from Jason and the rest, they let them go. Then 17:10 through 15, I guess the thesis here is that they've been driven out of Thessalonica. Paul is moving on to Berea. And in contrast to Thessalonica, the Jews in the new area they're moving to are much more open. They're much less traditional, and they were considered to be more honorable. So it's a bit of a different culture. So they're going to receive the gospel. They're going to receive the early church movement in kind of a different way. So Paul and Silas in Berea. 10. The brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea, located approximately 45 miles west of Thessalonica, about a 3-day at the time journey by foot. And this was another major city in the Roman province of Macedonia. So big picture, you're still in the same place. Culturally, you're in a very different place. And when they had arrived, they went into the Jewish synagogues. 11. Now these Jews were more noble or honorable, depending on the translation, and open-minded than those in Thessalonica, who were very traditional and very much not open-minded. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. In the non-judicial context, the Greek term that is used is more often than not is dealing with questions of discernment. So that reference to examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. This is a questioning examining. It's a discerning type of examining when you read it in the Greek. 12. Many of them therefore believed, with not a few Greek women of high standing as well as men. 13. But when the Jews from Thessalonica learned that the word of God was proclaimed by Paul at Berea, also they came there too, agitating and stirring up the crowds. 14. Then the brothers immediately sent Paul off on his way to the sea, but Silas and Timothy remained there. So they're splitting up. And Paul's the push here, not the push, but the reference to Paul being sent off is not 100% clear, but it comes across as if the main opposition was against Paul himself. Whatever he was doing, whatever he was saying, however he was conveying the gospel, because Silas and Timothy don't leave. They stay. The ministry continues to spread, regardless of the fact that Paul had to be sent away. So Paul's sending off is more of a personal, get out of here, rather than a dismissal of the Christian movement. So there was something about the way that Paul was doing ministry there that they weren't too fond of. So Silas and Timothy remained there. 15, those who conducted Paul brought him as far as Athens. So Paul heads south towards Athens, which is the center of Greek culture, which I feel like most people kind of know. You hear about Athens, Greek. It's one of those geographic terms that most people would at least recognize. So it's south of where they were previous and south of where Timothy and Silas still are. And after receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him as soon as possible, they departed. All right, do I have anything I need to look at? Or are we good? No, looks like probably not. Okay. Okay. Beautiful. All right, so now Paul in Athens, we've got 17, 16 through 34 in this next couple of paragraphs. Paul's ministry in Athens is showing how he ends up kind of changing the way he's going about ministry, and perhaps a reference to him being asked to leave and Timothy and Silas being allowed to stay. Possibly completely unrelated. It's not clear. But Paul's ministry and the way that he goes about things shifts in carrying out his mission to the Gentiles. His earlier speech at Pisidian Antioch is trying to convey this message to Jews and God-fearing Gentiles, like we read about at the beginning. But the speech in Athens, which is 22 through 34 here, shows how he is approaching the Gentiles now, who had no knowledge or any previous commitments to this true God, being the God of Israel. So verse 16, Paul in Athens. Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. 17, so he reasoned in the synagogues with the Jews and the devout persons and in the marketplace. The marketplace. So outside of preaching in synagogues, where there are set requirements of how many Jewish men need to be present, how things need to be conveyed or portrayed, and what you're really kind of allowed to say within a synagogue. Outside of that, Paul is also preaching in the economic center of Athens, which would be the marketplace here. Then there, within the marketplace, he could attract the attention of non-Jews and Jews, and he had much more freedom with how he chose to depict things and what he's able to say while preaching. So in the marketplace every day with those who happen to be there. 18, some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers who conversed with him. And some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection, again, 19, and they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting. So Epicureanism or Epicureanism was this system of thought. So again, you're referring to Epicurean and Stoicism. The system of thought that was Epicureanism, it was this idea that there was no connection between people and the divine, which is very much counter Christianity. We believe there's a direct connection between people and the divine, so much so that we believe that God's image is literally imprinted on every human on the planet. So this belief was expressed in a desire to seek commitment and satisfaction and to avoid pain and discomfort. The Epicureans began with Epicurus, which was 341 to 270 BC, who argued that the world was made of atoms and that the world was purely material. There was no spiritual connection whatsoever. Epicureans attempted to free people from the idea of the gods, because gods was usually plural back then. Christianity was kind of the faith system, the religion that was set apart, saying that it is just one God, one true God, not these many gods for many different things. So they believed in freeing people from the idea of the gods, the concept of an afterlife, and the fear of death. Everything is material. Everything is atoms. When you die, nothing happens. You just cease to exist. So the only value that remained was the literal physical reality of the individual, which is a very selfish life. It's a very satanic view. Again, satanic not being worship of the devil. That is Luciferianism. Satanism is just worship of self. And that's essentially what this pushes people towards. So there's no physical reality beyond the individual. Thus, the individual is freed from fear to pursue what truly gave pleasure. So this is a very self-seeking, self-benefiting ideology. Epicurus stressed that the contentment and nobility produce the best, most enjoyable life. And obviously it would appear that way because everything that you do and everything you believe is centered on yourself. It's all pleasure seeking. It's all make me feel good right now. Make me not be afraid right now. Then Stoic or Stoicism, they're still in verse 18, was essentially a pantheistic system that was, it really prioritized logic over anything else. And to a point, I'm a huge fan of the Stoics, of Stoic literature, and of Stoicism kind of in general, other than the lack of the spiritual connection. Everything else that they teach, I think, is fabulous. So Epicurean and Stoic philosophers who conversed with them, and some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. 19, and they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. 21. Now all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. So the resurrection reference in, I believe, at the end of 18. Yeah, the end of 18. The resurrection was, as I said a minute ago, extremely contradictory to both the Epicurean idea of death being completely non-spiritual, but also of the Stoic concepts of uniting with the divine and disengaging from the material world. So either way you bend it, Christianity was really pressing what this culture was used to being preached about and was being taught about. It was extremely, extremely different. And then 1719, the Areopagus, meaning the hill of Ares. Ares was the god of the war in Greek mythology, who is called Mars in Latin. This was the name of the location and also of the civil and religious council that met in that location. And then in 21, that's the last verse of that paragraph, the description of the regular activity at the Areopagus, Mars Hill, helps establish the irony of Paul's discourse, ironic to their culture. While the Athenians put Paul and Christianity on trial, Paul is putting their philosophies on trial in return. So as Paul is being questioned about the Christian concepts, Paul is flipping it back on them and trying to show that what they believe now makes no sense. And then he's giving reasons for why it doesn't make any sense. So Paul is putting their philosophies on trial in return. Therefore, what looks to the Athenians like confused thinking is actually pointing to the incoherencies within their own philosophy. Paul addresses the Areopagus 22. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious." 23. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription: to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown that I proclaim to you. 24. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. So the unknown God, he's trying to make them understand or demonstrate the lack of coherency, the lack of clarity, and any sort of certainty within the Athenian philosophy. Again, so he's constantly flipping what they're questioning him about and putting it on what they say they believe, trying to show and highlight the inconsistencies in what they're asking him about his God and what they already believe, which is logically inconsistent about their own God. They are freely admitting there could be a deity that they are unaware of. And at the same time, they're questioning Paul about a God that he's explaining that they are unaware of. And then does not live in temples made by man, the end of 24. Since God transcends all of creation, he does not need a place to live, a physical place, including the shrines on the nearby Acropolis. 25. Nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything at all, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. 26. And he made from one man every nation of mankind. The from one man. Paul is referring to Adam as the individual who all people are a descendant of, to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. 27. And they should seek God, also translated to search for God. People have there's an innate desire in people from the beginning of time to seek God, to connect with God. But their sin has, since the beginning of time, confused their understanding of how to connect and of who God is, and perhaps feel their way towards him. The Greek verb feel their way, also translated sometimes they might feel. The Greek verb is used to denote attempting to physically touch or to handle something. So something that is tangible, not this concept or ideology or philosophy. He's referring to something that is physical, something that you can physically touch, physically connect with, and is referring to a blind person walking in the dark. They can feel something and then kind of understand what their surroundings are. So feel their way toward him and find him, yet he is actually not far from each one of us. He is not far away. Another way that's translated, he is actually not far from us, or he is not far away. This is clashing with, again, the Epicurean belief of the divine as completely and entirely separate from the physical material world, and also the Stoic ideas or concepts or notions of God's presence in creation itself, that parts of creation were divine or divinely embodied. So he's pushing back on their spirituality, on their philosophy, on what they believe. 28, for in him we live and move and have our being. There is some argument about what Paul's actually referring to. So the most common is that Paul might be quoting the poet Epimenides of Crete. And the reason people believe that is because in Titus 1:12, you can find a similar reference. But also, on the other hand, he may simply be using a very common statement within Greek ideology or within Greek thought. It was just something also that was said. So it's kind of unclear what he's specifically referring to, but those are the two most common thought processes with it. As even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. That is a direct quote from one of the ancient poet philosophers, probably within the Stoic space, and specifically the Stoic poet Aratus. 29. Being then God's offspring, we ought not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of men. 30. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. 31. Because he has fixed a day on which he will judge. Paul is establishing God as both creator, and in being creator, God would also have the right to judge the world. So he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead, resurrection. 32. Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, because it was very anti-culture for them. But others said, we will hear you again about this. So they wanted to hear more. They were seeking, they were trying to understand. 33. So Paul went out from their midst, but some men joined him and believed, among whom also were Dionysius and Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So Dionysius and Areopagites, while it remains somewhat unclear of whether Paul was appearing before an official or more legalistic meeting of the Areopagus, at least one of the members within that council was present at the time and came to faith, which would be Damaris there. This chapter kind of cuts off cold. So after this 18, we jump into Paul in Corinth, which is really why we started doing Acts, because we read 1 Corinthians with all the reference to Acts and all of the geographical and early church movement styles and kind of how the early church moved within culture and how it grew in Acts gives you that big picture. And then now this will be a section where it gives you more of a tight line picture of Paul specifically in Corinth. And then after we finish Acts, we'll hop back into 2 Corinthians and then go on from there. But anything here, questions, comments, whatever, pop them in. We'll go over them and then we'll move off and do the whole modesty deal. Did I miss anything?
No.
Okay. It's all just
unless you know what Adam and Eve look like.
No. I can make something up, but no. I have to think they're perfect, right? They're like perfectly symmetrical. They're like, if there was ever a 10 out of 10 in beauty, it was probably them. Yeah. That would be my guess. But yeah, I've wondered about it, Karina. Like, what did they look like? Because they're always depicted kind of weird in like Christian TV and movies and whatnot. House cat? That's okay. We'll be a quiet and good house cat now. God. All right, we'll wait like 5 to 10 minutes. If you guys don't have anything, we'll move on. What's up?
No, I was just gonna say I can tell why they threw Paul out. I mean, I loved how he like throws it at him, just the God who made the world and everything in it.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Doesn't need a temple, doesn't need. I mean, it's pretty much telling them everything they believe is kind of a lie. I mean,
yeah, 100%.
Definitely turns the world upside down. So
very counterculture. Very counterculture. Like and that's kind of the funny thing, man. It's like in early church, you have Christianity as a movement being just wildly counterculture, stirring up so much crap within culture and refusing to go along with things that culture would prefer it went along with. And then now we have Christianity completely bending the knee to culture.
Yeah.
It's the literal polar opposite.
Doesn't repent also mean like turn 180 degrees or something like that?
Yeah, it's a straight turnaround. Yeah.
Sure.
Straight turnaround.
Bye, Karina.
Bye, Karina. Enjoy the basketball game.
Get Discord.
Yeah, you need to get Discord. We're going to say it every time.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to make a shirt.
And, Karina joined Discord.
Yeah.
All right. All right, like 1 minute, and then we'll just go ahead and switch over. Dun, 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 dun. So let's take a peek here for Thursday.
Every time I see Corinth, it's like, that's where my dad's from. That's where his side of the family is from, Corinth.
Really?
Corinth. Not the Corinth, but a city called Corinth.
Oh, okay. In the U.S.?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, no, whoa,
that would
dude.
be cool.
Yeah, that'd be wild. You got Apollos in Ephesus. You've got Paul in Antioch. And then you've got Paul in Corinth. So 18 should be pretty good. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and switch over. I will see you in a moment.
All right.
YouTube, bye-bye.